Hey everybody, this is Jeff with Challenger Auto and Truck Service, and going to take a moment to talk to everybody about timing belts. So I got a great example here of a timing belt for a four-cylinder engine, and the engines in regards to timing and how they connect the top and the bottom of the motor together, that's either done by use of a timing chain or a timing belt. If your engine has a timing chain, then there's typically not a service interval for that. If it has a timing belt, there is an interval for that. So most vehicles nowadays, we see a mileage interval of 105,000 miles to 120,000 miles. There are some vehicles that are at the 100,000 mile mark, but most of the time it's 105 to 120. What we used to see, if we rewind back to the 80s, 90s, we used to see a time and mileage interval. So kind of an and either or. So we used to see a 60,000 mile interval. So you might have seen 6 years every 60,000 miles, something along those lines. We have seen the time interval kind of disappear. I will say this is what I recommend. I would stick by the 8-year rule. So meaning if you're driving 10,000 miles a year and in 8 years you have 80,000 miles and your interval's every 105, my personal opinion is I would not want to gamble on possibly doing engine damage over an interval just based on mileage alone. I know on our Honda, when we had our Honda Odyssey, that was the rule that I went by. Our interval was every 105,000 miles. And I was not going to wait till we got to 105,000 miles after 8 years. The important thing about a timing belt, though, in regards to service, is just a quick explanation here. The bottom half is the crankshaft, and that is where how the pistons move up and down. The top half is for the camshaft, and that is how the valves open and close. And those have to be timed perfectly for the engine to run properly. And there are two types of engines. There are what's called interference and non-interference. And what does that mean? So on an interference engine, that means when the piston on a particular cylinder is all the way at what's called top dead center, all the way to the top of its travel, there is no clearance if one of the valves on that same cylinder were to be open, meaning they would hit each other. So in an interference engine, what happens is if the timing belt breaks or comes off because of maybe a tensioner failure or a pulley failure, there's a really good possibility that there's been internal damage done to the engine, meaning a bent valve, a damaged piston. On engines that are considered freewheeling, that means that there is clearance. And still, the way that the manufacturers list is they actually say that in the event of timing belt failure, valve to piston damage is unlikely. So they still don't give us a 100% guarantee. So when we consider what can happen on an interference engine, the timing belt interval is critical. And better to do a timing belt service than to have to do major engine repair over not doing the timing belt. So in this, what we're showing here, this is a whole timing belt component kit. So in this model, we have a new timing belt, we have a new water pump, new idler pulley, new tensioner pulley, and new tensioner. So if we rewind back, once again, back some time ago in the 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of just timing belts being done and not taking care of the other components that are on the timing belt. And the problem that created is, as these belts age, they're rubber, and as they age, they stretch out. A new belt is not stretched out. So when you put that new belt on these aged components that have bearings, such as this idler pulley or tensioner pulley, that actually changes the force in which the bearing is on. So just like a skateboard wheel or a roller skate wheel. And then what would happen is, because of that would actually, the bearing would fail in the pulley, and then next thing you know, the pulley itself locks up or breaks, and then the belt now comes off, shreds. Either way, it results in damage then. So they came out with full kits, and that is the way to go. We only do timing belt services at Challenger as a full kit. That is the correct way to do the job. The other thing that I really want to make sure all of our clients know is most warranties on services are 12 months, 12,000 miles. Our standard warranty for our repairs is 2 years, 24,000 miles. But on the timing belt service, we actually warranty the timing belt and the components in the kit for the interval of that vehicle. So if the timing belt interval is 100,000 miles, then our warranty is 100,000 miles on the timing belt, the idler tensioner pulley, the water pump, and the actual tensioner itself, which is a really good thing. My opinion, that's how that warranty should be. So in terms of function, how this works, this is based off of a four-cylinder engine, and as the engine turns, the crankshaft turns. That turns the water pump, which circulates the water through the engine. Then the camshaft turns, which allows all the valves to open and close. The water pump is the good thing about a timing belt service. When the water pump is driven by that belt, your coolant system service is also done at the same time. So if you have, most vehicles have extended life antifreeze. So those intervals are typically every 5 years and or 100,000 miles, whichever comes first. So when the timing belt gets done, the whole coolant system service is done. To properly do the timing belt, the coolant system is drained, the water pump is removed from the engine, so the antifreeze is drained out of the engine, and when the service is done, you have all new antifreeze. The other thing that I do want to make sure that I talk to clients about in regards to the timing belt interval and service is, I've been asked before, well, it's due at 105 and we're just over 105,000 miles, can I wait longer? Could I do it, a year from now? Is it that big of a deal? And I will talk about what actually happened. Now, this is quite some years ago, over 15 years ago, and ever since this happened, it's made me very nervous to say to a client, you should be fine. We had a client that had a Nissan Maxima, a very nice vehicle, V6, from an era where that vehicle was made really well. And the timing belt interval on that was every 60,000 miles. He had brought the vehicle in for a oil change and a couple maintenance items, and I explained to him his vehicle was at about 61,000 miles, and I told him that it was also time for the timing belt service. And he asked me, he said, you think it'd be okay if I waited a couple months? I need to get these other services done, and do you think it would be okay? And to be very honest here, I didn't think there'd be a problem. I've had, many clients do their timing belt, if it's 105, they've done it at 107. If it was 90, they've done it at 95, and I had never seen an issue. And meaning I just didn't think that a couple months would be that big of a deal. Well, after about 2 weeks, he called. His vehicle was broke down, and when we towed the vehicle in and diagnosed what had happened, the timing belt had actually broken. There was also a time interval with that engine, and he was over on that. But I never thought that short amount of time he was going to wait would create a problem. And that engine was an interference engine. And when the belt broke, it did damage valves. And I felt really bad. So what I will say is that if the timing belt interval is stated at 105,000 miles, that is the rule of thumb that I 100% recommend sticking with. Now, I also do not want people to worry that if they have it done at 105 plus 10 miles, I don't want people losing sleep over this. But I will not recommend or ever say anymore that you know, oh, I think everything will be okay. Majority of the time it probably will be, but in that circumstance, things did not work out. So I do recommend sticking to the recommended mileage and or time interval if it does have one. The investment into repairing an engine with valve damage or replacing the vehicle is way more money than just taking care of the timing belt. So once again, thank you so much for watching the video. If you have any questions in regards to your timing belt, or if your vehicle does have a timing belt, just give us a call at Challenger Auto and we'll talk to you the next time. Thank you.